a while loop to let the user guess again, because at the moment, once they make this one guess, then everything continues and we are at the end of the script. Now, how do we make them guess again? Well, we would need a while loop. So while some condition is true or while some condition is false, then we want to continue running a block of code, and then when that condition switches, we skip out of the loop and we continue in our code. So what is going to be that condition? Well, we can have a condition called game over, and we can set that to false. Now we can check for that condition. We can say while not game over, so while game over is false, we want the user to make some guesses, we want to update this display, and we also want to do the rest of the code because we need to check through the letter of their guess and see if we can update the display, etc., etc. So all of the rest of the code actually go into the while loop, and by go in, if you remember, it means that they get indented one step so that they're inside this while heading. Now, when do we actually change the while loop so that they can come out of it? Well, if we have these blanks in our display to represent the unguessed letters, if all the unguessed letters are guessed and there are no more underscores, well then at that point, that's when our game is over, right? So let's add an if statement and check if display, and there's a really useful function in Python which is called in. And what we can do with in is we can check to see if something exists in something else. So we can say if this underscore is not in our display variable, so this string does not contain any of these underscores, well at that point they've guessed everything because there's no more blanks, they've guessed all the letters, then at this point we can print you win. And that's also the right time point when we can change our game over so that we set it to true because they've won, therefore game is over. Now we're going to define other conditions for game over later on, but for now, at least we have one place where our code can exit the while loop, which is really, really important when you're writing while loops, because otherwise you get into this infinite loop situation, and that's not good. So let's test our first to do and see if it does what we expect it to do. So aardvark, let's guess the letter A. A gets filled in, and then it's asking us guess another letter, right? So let's keep typing because we know what the word is. But now we encounter another issue because notice how the R is being placed into our display variable and the rest of them are filled in with blanks. But our previous guess, the A, has disappeared from the display variable and it's replaced by blanks. So in this particular situation, we'll never get to the state where there are no more underscores in the display, because each time this while loop runs, we're only ever checking one letter, which is the current guessed letter. So to fix that, we have to go into to do number 2 and change the for loop so that we can keep the previous correct letters in the display string. So how do we do this? There's many ways of doing this, and one way of doing this is simply by creating a list. Now notice I'm going outside the while loop to create this list because I want this list to accumulate while the loop runs so that each time it's not being wiped blank. So if I create a new list here, which is called correct letters, and set it to a blank or a empty list like so, if this was placed inside the while loop, then every time the loop repeats, that list is going to be wiped to 0 because of this part here in this line. So instead, we want it to be outside the while loop. And now what we're going to do is if the letter that we're looping in through the word is matching the guessed letter by the user, then not only do we add that letter to the display, but we also add that letter to our list of correct letters. So correct letters dot append, and we're going to append this current letter that we're looping through. You can also append the guess, but at this point they are exactly equal, so it doesn't really matter which one you choose. It just depends on which you think is more readable. Now, if we rerun this code, it doesn't really change much, right? If I change a letter, it's still not doing what I want. So what I have to do also is probably add another check. So I'm going to check another condition using an elif. So if the current guess matches the letter that we're currently looping on, then we add the letter to the display. And if it doesn't match, then we add an underscore. But there's another condition we need to check. We need to check elif, the current letter that we're looping in, is in the list of correct letters. Because remember, if on a previous run of the while loop, a letter was guessed to be correct, then it gets added to this list of correct letters. And so now, whenever we check our letters and we want to fill in the other letters in the display, we need to make an elif. So in this case, what are we going to do? We're going to add the current letter to the display. So similar to this line here. So now, if we rerun this code, and we add a letter. So now B has been added to the display. Let's try N. So you can see now B is added, but N is also added. So the flow goes like this. The 4-letter in chosen word, the first one that gets turned into a letter is B. So we're checking, is B equal to the guess? At this point, yes. So then we add B to the display and we add blanks to the rest of it. Now then, the correct letter is added to this list. So B now lives inside this list. And notice it's outside the while loop, so it doesn't get modified when the while loop repeats from the top of the block of code. So the next time this runs, we're guessing a different letter. We're guessing N. So when N is true, then we are adding N to our display. But when something else is not, one of the letters that we're looping in is not matching guess, for example B, but it is in fact inside the list of correct letters, then that letter also gets added to the display. And this might be something that you want to try and run in Thonny if it is confusing. But if it all makes sense, then feel free to continue to the next step in the game.